We having fun?
Yeah.
Woo! This next person I had to track down. I had to do cyber stalking, which was new for me. Robert Callahan, could you join us on stage? And I know you're gonna like this.
I have a story in sky-tinted waters. This is not the one, but that one's pretty good. Joe lost his girlfriend when she jumped to her death. No, he wasn't with her when she did, but he did see her earlier that night, and that last conversation they had still haunts him to this day. It was then that she asked him if there was ever a time in his life when he felt completely helpless, when he couldn't speak or move or even think for himself, and he told her no, and that caused her to smile and look deeply into his eyes. And for a moment he got the feeling there was more than just her looking. And then she told him that she hoped he never did, and that she loved him, and she wanted to be sure that he knew that, and that she had a chance to tell him that one last time while she still could. Now, she had no history of mental illness, and the autopsy showed no trace of drugs or alcohol in her system. The only thing they found was a spider lodged inside her head, resting just on top of the brainstem. And after some fruitless speculation as to just how it got there, the coroner concluded that its presence couldn't be explained, but that her erratic behavior and her subsequent suicide could be attributed to having had her brain displaced, even as slightly as it was, by that little spider inside her. Now, over the next couple of years, Joe came to terms with his lost love, but he never stopped obsessing over that spider. He dug up all the information he could on parasites, and he found wasps that lobotomized roaches and paralyzed tarantulas, leaving them alive but unable to act against the laying and the eventual hatching of larvae within their own still helpless living bodies. He found parasites that force ants to vie hard for the attention of predatory birds or simply jump from high branches to the hard, unforgiving ground below. And he learned that the world of the minute and the microscopic was rife with mind-eating and mind-controlling parasites, but most of what he could find out about spiders was more along the conventional lines of their various toxins' effect on their prey. For example, he learned that the widow and the recluse, most commonly blamed with death due to spider, are actually timid creatures that would rather run and hide than bite and kill. And even then, all but the most severe of allergic reactions results in vomiting and painful spasms at worst. However, the Brazilian wandering spider is far more deadly, delivering a potent enough venom to kill an adult human in about 3 bites, and being aggressive enough to chase a guy down to do it. Now, they're also known as banana spiders because they sometimes end up in supermarkets having hitched a ride up north, so keep an eye out for those. And he also found some extensive folklore surrounding the existence of a communal, cave-dwelling species of spider living in genetic isolation high on a plateau in South America, whose incredibly strong venom doesn't kill, but first paralyzes, then causes hallucinations, and finally enhances every physical sensation the body can endure until the slightest touch is felt tenfold. Now, if one of these spiders were to bite you, you could only lie there, seeing things and feeling everything more intensely than you can really handle, as thousands of its little friends descend from the walls and the ceilings and they dine upon your body, and you die. Slowly. Eventually, after a few days of being nibbled to death by the swarm. But it took him years to find that page on GeoCities that had what he was really looking for. Documented evidence that there's a kind of spider out there that lives exclusively within the brains of mammals. And he emailed back and forth a couple times with the site's webmaster, who gave her name as Melissa Scarlett, before they decided they would finally meet in person. Now, neither of them wanted to reveal their home address. They chose a neutral public location from which first to join forces against this 8-legged menace. Joe met Melissa in the library. It was one of the big, old ones with floor-to-ceiling shelves full of must and mold, pressed tightly between the pages of countless tomes. And he found her at a table with stacks of old books in front of her and iPod buds in her ears. And he asked what she was listening to, and she told him, "Revolver, but that's not important, sit down." She was a little crazy and a little mean. So naturally, he fell a little in love with her as she filled him in on the many hints throughout recorded history left by the previous spider fighters. See, the Greeks, the Romans, the Byzantines, Aztecs, Egyptians, Zulus, even the ancient Chinese, they all had their lesser-known legends about these spiders. They'd been infesting humans for as long as recorded history could show, but only rarely were they ever exposed. And now she and he were answering an esoteric calling that was old as the parasitic problem itself, and soon they were teaming up against these unseen, multi-legged monsters. So she schooled him on everything he'd need to know. For example, these things don't just live in the brain, they learn to control it. See, like strands of web, they manipulate the neurons and the chemical synapses, a tap here and a tug there, stimulating the cortex with commands that grow harder and harder to resist. And after a while, they're literally piloting our bodies around, guiding our actions and our thoughts and our perceptions while they rest comfortably inside our heads. She told him that over the time they take control, you'll notice subtle changes in a person's behavior. Well, they'll start out acting mildly erratic as the bug within finds its bearing, and then over a few months they'll gradually go from erratic behavior to total debaggery as their own personalities are consumed by the mastications of those monsters within. And she said, you can tell a person is possessed because you look into their eyes and you feel 8 others looking back at you. She told him many other things as well. For example, there's an urban legend about a kid who scraped his cheek on a rusty nail and a few days later had dozens of baby spiders hatching under the scab. You've heard it? According to Melissa, that was an urban legend. It was just a true story that got the facts skewed over countless retellings. The truth was, these spiders weren't just getting in our brains and being benign about it. They used us as incubators. They laid eggs inside, and when that egg sac hatched, hundreds of little hatchlings poured out the nasal cavity or burrowed their way out through the ears or the mouth in search of the next unspoiled brain. So a lot more happened in the months after Joe first met young Miss Scarlet in the library with the revolver. See, he started wearing a SARS mask to bed because at night when you're asleep, you're most vulnerable. In fact, one night he actually woke up to something tickling his face, and he caught one trying to squeeze its way under the mask. But they both got a little paranoid after that, thinking the spiders were onto them, so they stepped up their efforts, and they actively hunted down the infested among us. At that point, they ate on the go, and they only slept when exhaustion forced it, and at all other times they were on a mission to save the human race, and to free the infested from both their arachnid overlords and their respective mortal coils. Because there was no way to remove a spider from the center of another person's brain without making a big, sloppy mess of a killing in the process. So Joe and Melissa avoided the mess and just went for the killing. And they were always out there looking for you. If you were a little weird or quirky, or you wouldn't make eye contact, or you wore sunglasses everywhere. See, they assumed you were hiding something, and God help you if they found out you were a spider zombie. Now for months, they quietly culled the ranks of the enemy and burned the bodies, and it was long, hard work, and combined with their bad diets and their lack of sleep, it really did exhaust them. And Melissa was the first of the two to lose her gusto. She gradually slowed down and seemed less interested in the mission. She'd stop Joe and she'd ask to sit, and sometimes for hours, and they would just talk. And they really got to know each other a lot better when they stopped spending all of their time killing. And after a while, Joe could tell that she seemed to starting to feel the same way about him as he did for her. Even as she wore down and eventually donned a pair of sunglasses to cover her constantly sunken, bloodshot eyes, they grew closer. And then, one day, completely out of the blue, they had that proverbial serendipitous first kiss. And like any other first kiss that comes at the end of a long period of anticipation, their bodies buzzed when their lips first touched. That trademark tingle of the touch you've been dreaming of shot down Joe's spine and stood his hairs on end, and in all of the excitement of it, he barely noticed that just inside his lips, the tingle had turned into more of a tickle, as if something tiny with a lot of legs was scurrying around his mouth. And then there was another, and another still, and soon his mouth was filled with creepy, crawly little invaders darting about. Well, he pushed her away, and when he did, he saw hundreds, maybe even thousands more baby little spiders pouring out of her, so he choked and spit them out as he ran, hoping none of them ever made it to his brain. And I'd like to tell you there's some moral to be had, or a resolution of some kind, or a happy ending, but I can't. See, Joe never saw Melissa again, and that's the last I know of their story. And for those of you wondering whether or not this story is true, I'll just say, true enough. Of course, I changed the names to protect the survivors, but other than that, you can rest assured that these things really did happening, and they're still happening right now. And I hope none of you ever have to go through that yourselves. In fact, I wanted to be sure that I had a chance to come up here and tell you that I feel this way, and that you knew that, and that I had a chance to warn you while I still could.